Oh my gosh, do I have things to show you and teach you about the election of presidents and the election cycle and what it means to stock traders and investors. So with that, let's get going. The gloves have really come off. And it looks at this point that Joe Biden's going to be the next president if you look at all the mainstream media polls. I'm going to get to that in a moment, but the market does seem to know. In 9 out of the last 10 elections, when the market was above average during the election year, the incumbent party candidate was reelected. So does that mean Donald Trump could win this thing? Well, I'm going to get back to that more in just a moment, but first we need to follow up. I did a forecast here for stockcharts.com where we called China should be body slammed, and here's the forecast report that we did. You can see the red line is our fundamental indicator from the Federal Reserve System about what should happen to stock prices in China. And kind of got body slammed. It came down. Our forecast was to sell over here. It hasn't gone up, but it hasn't come down certainly as much as I thought. So we need to follow up. Where now? What next? Well, the fundamental forecast goes flat in here. Look at that, which suggests no big up move in China. We should have had a big decline in here. We did have a decline, not as much as I wanted, but it was better to be short than long. The market's come back down a little bit now. But for our friends in China who follow this market, flat trading until probably the first of this coming year. The Korean forecast has been much more accurate in terms of the market coming down more. You can see the forecast, and this is a follow-up on what's happened. But basically, these Asian countries really follow this fundamental forecast. So just a point to keep in mind. You can see what's happened in Korea. Again, it looks like flat trading range market. No big moves coming up in the Kospi. We also talked about the 70-day, 72-day cycle in stocks in the U.S., and that suggested a low about, whoa, right here, right now, about October 20th. And I think we are getting into that. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, but that 72-day cycle, that's still strong. We also showed this forecast for Amazon, what we thought would take place in Amazon. This was done in September. And as we follow up, oh, look at that. We're pretty well following the forecast, which means Amazon people look for a nice rally around Christmas. Okay, let's go back to the big deal right now, the election. We're going to have a new president or an incumbent president in just a matter of days. And this thing has really turned into a brouhaha, a battle royale. So how do we figure out what's going to happen? We can look at the polls, or we can look at stock market charts to see if there's any historical precedents that might have significance here, that might give us an indication of who's going to win and what does it mean? What does a Biden victory mean? I'm going to show you. What does a Trump victory mean? I'm going to show you. So we're protected one way or another. Whichever one of these guys wins, we're going to have a trading strategy and an investment strategy. Well, if we look at the polls, that's one thing we can do. It looks like Clinton was going to win the election and Trump was not going to win the election. That was 4 years ago. And of course, we know Donald Trump, some way or another, beat the polls. So that's an interesting question. Just how accurate are these polls? And the big thing in the polls isn't just the total number of votes that are cast, but if you win the Electoral College. This is a current forecast by most of the polls. You need 270 votes to win, but we've got 259 for Biden and 125 for Trump. So it certainly looks on the surface of the major polls that Joe Biden will be the next president. Or will he? National Public Radio said Biden now has a double-digit lead over Trump. Clearly, Biden's way ahead in the campaign. We had the debate. The last of their debates, probably a push. They both look pretty good, in my opinion. Neither of them were bumbling idiots this time. So probably a push for both those guys. Oh, speaking of polls, remember this? I remember this as a kid. Dewey defeats Truman. Well, wait a minute. Actually, Truman won. The pollsters were wrong. That was because back then they did their polls on telephones, and not only Republicans had telephones back then. So Dewey, being a Republican, got a lot more response in the polls. That was one of the first classic eras of polling. Of course, now everybody has a telephone and everybody has a cell phone, so it's a different ballgame. But the polls that we saw, they were not correct on Trump, and they certainly weren't correct on Truman beating Dewey. Polls are correct, though, for what they sampled. Now, I've had a lot of experience. As some of you know, I ran for the United States Senate in Montana 2 times against incumbent senators. They were really strong political battles, barely lost, a real big defeat in my life. But I learned about polls, and because we use them in our campaign, I've been involved extensively in other campaigns over the years as a consultant. So I've used polls, I understand polls, I think pretty well from real-time example. And here's the errors you might want to think about when you're looking at these polls. And the big one right now is the sample size realistic for voter turnout. Right now, most of the mainstream media polls are showing that there's going to be a huge number of young people will come out and vote, much larger than in the past, as large as when Obama ran. I think that's an assumption on their part that's probably not going to be true. Regardless of your politics, I don't think you can get really too energized about Joe Biden. A lot of people can't get energized at all about Donald Trump. His base gets very energized about him. So will we have a massive turnout this time? Questionable at best. So another thing pollsters will do, they will sample, as an example, 60% Republicans and 40% Democrats and say the Republicans are going to win. So their sample size was biased. It was correct for the sample size they had. They really have to watch out who these people are sampling. And of course, they do ask biased questions at times, and you can do that. If I want to create a poll to make my candidate look happy, I just can ask a question that will make everybody reply to him. Do you want to vote for the guy who beat up his wife, or do you want to vote for my candidate? Well, guess what? My candidate's going to win that. So you have to really watch. And of course, sample size. Surprisingly enough, I've done sample sizes in races of over a million votes with a sample size of 400 people in a survey that were spot on in the prediction of who would win the races. So sample size is helpful. The bigger the sample size is, the more helpful it is. But sample size, from my experience, doesn't have to be gargantuan, but at least 400 or 500 voters responses, and you're going to get a pretty good idea of who will win. Well, the key points to watch in this election as it grinds down to a close is the enthusiasm factor. If your guys don't turn out to vote, you're not going to win. So can you drive your core group to the polls? That's really critical. Well, Biden's going to drive his core group to the polls because they hate Donald Trump. Yeah, maybe they like Joe, but that's more they don't like Donald Trump. Donald Trump's voters are really pumped up. They want this guy to win. So they probably have the enthusiasm factor. The high polls, now this is really interesting to me. The mainstream media, I think, this is my view, has really pumped up a Biden victory here by saying he's way ahead in the polls, as you're going to see in a moment. I don't think he is. I think this might shoot themselves in the foot, because if everybody thinks Biden's going to win and you're a Biden supporter, you're probably not going to come out and vote. I mean, are you going to watch a Super Bowl if you know it's a blowaway game? No, it's not interesting. If you think that Trump is going to win by 30 points, you're going to go out and vote? No, probably not. So that's a point to watch. There has been a big black Hispanic switch here that Donald Trump is getting more, based on all the polls I've seen, of the black vote and the Hispanic vote than he did last time, by quite a bit, interestingly enough. So that's another thing to watch. This mainstream media thing really gets to me, because these guys are really, they're, I think, ginning the race for Joe Biden, showing him 10 points up, 15 points up. I think one poll he was up 18 points up. They could be right. If they are right, man, we're learning a great lesson here. If they're wrong, if it's a very close race or Trump wins, then I think it's proof positive that the mainstream media is just horribly biased. They are part of the swamp, the establishment, whatever it is. They want to orchestrate American politics. So to me, that's a big point. Whoever wins, we're going to show you how to handle that in a moment. But the big point here is, if these guys are really wrong in the polls, you got to be very careful what the media is trying to pump down your throat. Here is a big takeaway from work I've done with a candidate in a current election. We really have three parties in America now. Most people don't realize this. We have Democrats and Republicans, as always. This is Wisconsin party affiliation. Look at that, the unaffiliated, undecideds, independents, whatever you want to call them. There's more of those than Republicans or Democrats. So whoever's going to win is the person who's going to get most of the undecided or the unaffiliated vote. That is the key group in virtually every senatorial race this year. Who's going to win is not who can get their party and a few of the other parties, who can get that undecided vote. That's really what wins the elections in this day and age. Well, here's the cookie poll. There's a baker in Pennsylvania. You can buy a Donald Trump cookie or a Joe Biden cookie. This might be just as reliable as any other poll. After all, Gallup, certainly the leading pollster in America, stopped doing presidential elections because they had been wrong. The cookie poll, for each cookie sold, the staff marks it on a board. So far in Pennsylvania, Trump's leading about 2-1. This is the third presidential race, and they've been right in all of them. So a lot of kooky polls out there you might want to watch. But here's the big thing. Who are you going to trust? Who was the best pollster last time? The Trafalgar Group was the only pollster within the Real Clear Politics polling aggregator to show Trump winning Michigan. And they also showed Trump winning Pennsylvania. They were alone of all the pollsters in the Real Clear Politics to correctly get Trump winning Pennsylvania and taking the White House. So I pay a lot of attention to the Trafalgar Group. I think they have a little conservative bias, frankly, but they have been very good here. So I closely watch what they're saying. And this is what they're saying now. Trump wins. They say if it happened all right now, the president's talking, my best guess would be an electoral college victory in the high 270s to low 280s. Pretty significant. These guys got it right last time when most everybody else got it wrong last time. So watch out for the Trafalgar Group. And I think I'm going to have an insight on some of their polls Monday. So we might do something, at least make some type of announcement as we know that we get more data on Tuesday. There's also a big data poll. They've also been very correct. Real Clear Politics projected Trump to win Florida by 0.2. Big data poll had Trump ahead by 1.6, and he won by 1.2. Michigan's had big pollsters had Clinton winning. Big data poll, I had Trump winning, and he did win. They also got Pennsylvania. They were a little wrong in New Hampshire. They had Trump up 0.6 and Clinton won by 0.3, really close race. But the best pollsters that I found that were right the most last time, big data and Trafalgar Group. So you might want to Google and watch those guys because so far, knock on wood, they've had the best record. And they're saying right now, everywhere we polled in the Rust Belt, nationally in Florida, New Hampshire, voters expect Donald Trump to win. Now, they do it differently. They ask the question in several ways. One is, who do you think your next door neighbors will vote for? Because a lot of people don't want to say, I'm going to vote for Joe Biden or I'm going to vote for Donald Trump because there's a lot of social stigma to that. So they ask an obtuse question like, what are your neighbors going to vote? What do you think people around you will vote? And they have done very good with that question instead of asking, who are you going to vote? Wherever they polled, they think that that Trump's going to win. So interesting takeaway. Well, another way you can look at this is to look at the betting odds. These are the betting odds. You can get this on Real Clear Politics. The blue is the betting odds for Biden. Notice he's starting to pull away, and the betting odds for Trump. Trump has been in a downturn, but the last couple of weeks, we've started to turn up. Trump has started to turn up. Biden starting to turn down. Now, after the debate and over the weekend, there'll probably be a lot of stuff. You want to look at this over the weekend to see what's happening in the polls in terms of real money being placed on these two guys. Here's a big one, money. Biden campaign has raised more money than Donald Trump. Almost $1 million, a little over $100 million more. That is significant. And I'll tell you this about politics. One, I don't think money matters all that much, certainly helps, but I've seen candidates win without very much money because they were strong people with strong ideas. But if you really want to see what predicts elections, who's going to win the best, it's not the number of dollars, it's the number of people that gave to the candidate. That clearly is one of the very best indicators of who's going to win a race, especially in congressional and senatorial races. It doesn't matter how much money was raised, that's how many people took money out of pocket and gave it to the candidate. That shows a huge amount of support. There's another interesting model I'd like to point out to you, may not be aware of. It's a Norpoth model. In March 2016, Helmut Norpoth forecast an 87% chance of victory for Trump. And as we know, Trump won. This model has been right in 25 out of the last 27 elections since 1912. It missed in 1960 and 2000, and of course that won the popular vote, but Bush won. In 2020, the model gives Trump an even higher chance of winning, 91%. Some of this is flying in the face of conventional wisdom here that Donald Trump is going to lose this thing and in a massive landslide for Joe Biden. But a couple of models are saying no, and I think we can infer from that, my view, it's going to be real close. What to watch election night? Just a couple of states. Donald Trump must win Florida without a doubt. He really needs to win North Carolina. He's got to take Ohio, got to take Michigan, Iowa, and Arizona. These are the 9 states that I think will decide the election based on our system of electoral college as how we determine who wins and who loses the campaigns. Those are the states to focus on election night. You'll be up late night watching television, the talking heads, eating your popcorn. Focus on those states. Right now, Pennsylvania, Trump has started to pick up. These are the polling odds. And again, we're using Real Clear Politics. Biden has started to come down. Trump has started to come up a little bit. Pennsylvania, if Trump takes Pennsylvania, he probably will take this thing if Biden wins. It's Biden's. Wisconsin, Biden's pulling away a little bit here. Michigan, it's a sure Biden win. It looks like, though, internal polling I've seen says no, but right now, Real Clear Politics says he's going to win it. Last time Trump won, and I remember driving through Michigan shortly before the election, and all I saw were Donald Trump signs. I didn't see any Joe Biden signs. I thought, whoa, Trump's going to win this thing. So that's also a pretty good indication who's got the most signs up, especially if they're not campaign signs. It's the signs that people make themselves and put up. You see a lot of those. That candidate's got a lot of support. Arizona, look at this, so interesting. Biden's picking up support. Trump is picking up support. That's going to be another close state to watch as well. North Carolina looks like it's all Biden. He's pulling away quite a bit. Florida, Trump's got to win this one. Just got to win this one. So can he pick up? We'll have to watch this election night rolls around. But right now, it's really close. They're just a couple points apart. Well, yesterday, Rasmussen report broke their survey that shows Biden's leading Trump 49 to 46% among likely U.S. voters. 2 weeks ago, Biden was ahead by 12. A week ago, he was up by 8. So there has been a shift here in voters' view, voters' desires of who they want to be president, which is why I think this thing is going to be pretty close race. It might be a very long election night. But who wins and what it means is really the important thing to us. It's fun to talk about polls and politics and who might win, but what the heck does it mean if Biden wins, if Trump wins? I am going to show you, grab onto your seatbelt. This is really powerful stuff. First of all, volatility declines after elections. We had a very volatile year this year, but look what happens. 90 years of data reveals that volatility sharply falls after the election. Here's the election. We come up to the election, volatility increases. Then after the election, boom, volatility comes down. So I think we'll have a less volatile market after the election. First takeaway point, less volatility after the election. And it's who wins, not the party that matters. This is a huge takeaway. Whether you're a liberal, socialist, Democrat, or a flaming right-wing radical person, it's who wins, not the party. If you maintain the power in office, the median change in the following year is 9%. If you lose the power and party loses, it's a minus 6%. I'm going to show you some really interesting charts on this. So I think it's the maintaining the power that matters more than whether it's a Republican win or a Democratic win. Here look at this chart. This is the pattern of the stock market in the years that the party in power lost. And this is the stock market today. Notice the point. When the party in power, whether it was a Democrat or Republican, when they lost, the incumbent president lost, we rallied up, we peaked in August and came down until around the election and rallied. So what's this year's pattern? Well, we actually came down at the first of the year. And so far, our high was over here. So we're not really following the pattern of the incumbent losing or a shift in power. So we better look at the other side of this coin. What happens when the party in power stays in power? Again, it doesn't matter if it's Republican or Democrat. If they stay in power, this is the pattern. I think the market's suggesting to us that the party in power will stay in power. Now, this is interesting. Patterns of years when Democrats won, this is the election year, just like we're in right now. When Democrats won, this was the pattern the market took. We made lower lows in here than we did just before the election than we did in September. Well, we haven't done that. We're actually holding a little bit better than that. When Republicans have won, this is during the election year, on average, the markets come down, bounce around, made highs, come down. This looks a lot more like this year's pattern, doesn't it? Maybe this is better than polling. We're going to find out in just a matter of days. Now, this is, I love this. Look at this. This is the first year after the election. It doesn't matter who wins, loses, good guy, bad guy, whatever. The market bounces around until about April, and then it takes off on a nice rally. So we have a pretty good insight now that our investment strategy coming up for 2021, maybe just expect a flat trading range for a while, but around April, expect a nice up move in the market. However, can we take that a little deeper? Yeah, we sure can. This is what happens in years Republicans win. We start off pretty well, dip, come up to around June, then we come down. Where Democrats win, we're much stronger. And that's the way people have usually looked at the year after a president is elected. And there's another way to look at it that I'd like to show you. The S&P has stumbled in most post-election years when the incumbent party loses. Since 1930, those years average a median loss of 6.6%. So it doesn't matter, it looks like, what party moves into the White House or stays, but if the incumbent party loses, it's not a good year. And this is probably why. If we look at the first year after a party in power loses, okay, when the party in power loses, that would be Donald Trump losing the election this year. If he were to lose the election this year, this is what happens the first year after the party in power loses. And I think there's a real explanation for this. Notice what happened when, it doesn't matter if it's a Republican or Democratic administration, if they lose and new power comes into play, the markets weaken until March. Why? Well, think about it. You have a new president, they have to get a new cabinet, new people, you got to kick the old guys out, get your guys in. It's a whole transition phase, and I think that explains why when an incumbent is boosted and a new player comes in, you should expect a choppy trading range market, maybe with a downward bias until March, middle of March, as the transition takes place. So if Joe Biden does win this, I'm going to be looking for a strong market starting in about March. But the rest of the first of 2021, probably a know-nothing market, go up and down following some pattern like this, because what we've seen in those time periods is a transition of government is a transitory economic backdrop. And that means unknown in the market. It's uncertainty. Who's this guy now going to appoint? He's going to have tax cuts. What's he going to do? So that's the pattern of what happens when we have a new power take place. So this isn't specific to Joe Biden or Democrat or Republican. It's about the passage of power from one party to another. So who wins really matters. The S&P has rallied in most post-election years when the incumbent party wins. So if you're a stock guy, you want the incumbent party to win. Doesn't matter if they're Democrats, Republicans, technocrats, libertarians, whatever they are, you want them to win. Since 1930, those average a median gain of 9%, a little over 9%. And this is the way it looks when the party stays in power. When they stay in power, we come up, we drift into a March low, come up and have a nice, strong year. And again, doesn't that make sense? Because you don't have to have the transition of government. The same dirty dog stays in power. So he's going to make a couple cabinet changes here and there, but nothing major. So if Trump stays in office, then I would expect the market to be relatively strong the first part of the year and then really take off starting around April based on the transition of power as opposed to Democrat or Republican. I think it's the power that is more significant to the market based on my study, as you can see here, of charts of how the market is actually performing. This is not my politics or anybody else's politics. This is what the market has actually done following, and look at that again. When the party in power loses, we're choppy if down until March, transition of government. When we win, a party in power wins, you don't have that. The market can continue going up, and then it gets quite strong the rest of the year because they're still in control. They still are mastering the ship, and the ship is going to go in the direction they want it to go. This is the forecast that I made in 2012, last year, for this year. This might give us some insight as well as to what's going to happen. What I thought would happen, the dip into March, then a nice rally the rest of the year. And that seems to be the pattern that we're on. Here we are in October. We've had a bit of a dip in here, and we should continue moving higher. One thing for sure is following the election, the market will rally. If the Senate flips, and a lot of Republicans are worried about this, what if the Senate becomes Democrats? Well, Bernie Sanders said it best: the Democrats will pass massive stimulus bills if the party flips the Senate. And I don't know what your politics are, but I know reality. A massive stimulus bill is really bullish for the market. One of the best signs of stock market strength is deficits. The larger the deficit, the more bullish the stock market is, and it's been that way in time and eternity. So don't get in too much of a flap if you see a large deficit, if you see a massive stimulus bill, at least on a short, intermediate, maybe even long term, it's very bullish for stock prices. My conservative Democrat, Republican, or Democratic friends that are conservative think these deficits are bad, the market's going to crash. Well, you know what? When I first started trading in 1962, I heard that, and I used to believe it. But we've never really had any significant crashes, and we continue to have large deficits. And all I know is if you look at the relationship between deficits and stocks, it's really bullish for the stock market. If you're interested in come trading with me, you can go to, my tools are now on stockcharts.com. My trading tools that I use are there. You might be able to learn a little bit from that. But bottom line here, as we wrap this up, the future of America is in front of us. It doesn't matter who's elected. We'll suffer through it and we'll be okay. And historically, stocks have always started to rally just before the election and right after the election. You got a nice short-term trade, 3, 4, 5 days right after the election. It doesn't matter who wins. We're happy to be out of politics. We have a new direction and the market rallies. So get ready for a short-term rally right after the election. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the presentation today. I look forward to doing another one on stockcharts.com. And so until the next time, I'd like to thank you. Feel free to share and give a thumbs up if you see us on YouTube. And best of all, to each and every one of you, good luck and good trading.
Hey, Grayson Rose here with Stock Charts. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, consider giving it a like down below, maybe leave us a comment, and if you're new to the channel, you can subscribe at the link up above. We're gonna bring you daily content from an incredible collection of technical analysts and financial experts.